Welcome to the Shade Chronicles, an anthology-style podcast featuring short works of fiction and serial prose, specifically with a sci-fi and horror flavor. Your hosts for the podcast are Derek Leftridge and Lawrence Trokey.
Hi, this is Derek Leftridge, and I would like to welcome you to the first episode of the Shade Chronicles.
Hi, this is Lawrence Trokey, and I also want to welcome you, and thank you for spending your time with us. Let's get started with our first story.
His Nightmares by Derek Leftridge. What the hell was that? I say to myself while slowly regaining consciousness and realizing it's the same thing that always happens. You can set your watch by it as my sleep is disturbed, and here I go, waking up violently again in bed, trying to catch my breath while disoriented and looking in all directions in the blackness of the room. I just felt something brush aggressively against my uncovered foot, and it's very annoying to be in a deep sleep and then be woken up, but since this is certainly not the first time experiencing this, what happens next will quickly pass annoyance and go straight to diabolical. Whatever woke me was in a hurry and moving fast from left to right at the foot of the bed, and in the dark out of the corner of my eye I can barely make out what looks like something in the corner of the room. I slowly look to the right and try adjusting to the darkness and use what little moonlight is coming into the room to see what looks like a human figure facing the corner. Straining a bit, I can make out that it's a woman's figure by the look of the hips, and this figure is nude. With a slow and cautious movement, I roll over onto my right side and stare into the corner where the figure is, and my sleep-swollen eyes adjust a bit more and I see the figure more clearly, and it's standing there facing the corner with her head tilted back, looking up at the ceiling. The female then stretches her hands up to the ceiling, palms open, facing towards the ceiling, and arches her back, and I can see her breast sticking out slightly below her shoulder blades. This confirms it's a woman, and in addition, the large slash on her back flesh helps jog my memory to know who she is. Even though I never feel bad about my work or my passion, I make an effort to only involve those who need to be. However, when someone interferes, and this woman did, there can be direct consequences. This seems to happen a lot, and unfortunately for this individual, her last vision was of me when she fell into a perpetual darkness. Veering back to the current situation, I blink and look again to the corner of the room where the figure is, and they are gone. Quickly sitting back up in bed, I look to the opposite left corner, then back to the right, but then feel something to the left of me sliding into the bed. Slowly looking down to my left, I can see she's in the bed and facing up at me. Startled, I open my mouth and cannot catch my breath quick enough to make a sound before her hands are around my neck. Fingernails digging deep into my neck, and pressure on my esophagus causing me to choke on my fluids. Regrettably, my sight diminishes rapidly to a shroud of blackness, and all I can hear is the sound of the struggling and screaming that I'm making, and the lady croaking and gritting her teeth as I drift away. The motivated little lady has accomplished her goal to get her revenge. Emerging from my darkness, I realize I'm behind the steering wheel, hands attending to, of a loud truck driving at a above-average speed through a faintly lit tunnel. As I glance up at the rearview mirror, I can see that something is coming up fast behind me, and as the distance quickly closes between me and my follower, I can make out a hefty individual on an unrealistically high handlebar chopper that is belching and popping as it blows thick white smoke. The leather vest covered in patches and the bandana tightly around the long flowing hair of my follower completes the hard-ass look, as does his young, bearded face that is full of anger. I can't help but feel overwhelmed with pride by this beautiful sight of passion and pain all at one time, but I quickly realize this guy's endgame is going to involve something bad involving something to do with me. Not sure why, but an unconscious desire to slow down the vehicle overcomes me, and I begin to bring the truck to a stop and step out. My friend comes to a complete stop about 5 feet behind me. While throwing down the kickstand and leaning the bike to rest on it, he begins to dismount and makes a move. At the same time, he unlatches and reaches into a saddlebag at the left side of his motorcycle while looking in my direction with an odd grin. Unfortunately, my experience in these situations always seems to involve heavy, thick chains. And as I say this to myself, he pulls out a very long, glowing, white, hot, heavy, thick chain, and he growls and lunges at me. He simultaneously whips the chain with incredible ease, and it defies all laws of physics and is instantly wrapped around my neck. The tightening links dig and burn my neck as it cuts off my breath, and simultaneously he jerks me to the ground while grabbing at the chain. My body begins to slide towards him across the loose gravel and rough asphalt of the road. I reach up with both hands, and through white-hot burning pain, I loosen the chain slightly and manage a quick gulp of air, but he is already crouching above me, and we are now face to face. In a feeble attempt at defense, I reach up to gouge his eyes, but the problem is there are none there, and I realize that was my doing earlier today. He laughs at my attempt, and a thick stream of slobber from his rotting mouth drips onto my cheek. The smell is wretched, and I begin to feel the bile rising from my stomach up into my throat as my system begins to work in reverse. The freak clasps his hands around my neck and squeezes. This is beginning to be a trend this evening. Then he changes things up by placing his stank mouth with cracked lips onto mine, making a tight seal. Stars begin to dominate my vision as I try to blink them away. Disoriented and blindness begins to envelop me. Before going completely comatose, I feel him clamp down on my tongue with his teeth, which causes me to catch a scream in my throat. Beginning my drowning into a deep, painful unconsciousness, my memory is sparked by understanding this guy is only doing what is expected if he wants me to hurt the way I hurt him. This is beginning to be a long night, first with that crazy woman in my bed, and then the chain-wielding face-eater on the motorcycle, and now an annoying little individual. Sitting here in the dark, deserted, and I had thought empty all-night cafe waiting for my next cup of coffee to come, I feel kick, 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 reverberating from the lower back of my booth with a rhythm that is making me nauseous. This has to stop now. I quickly slide out of my booth and turn around to the left to see what is making the annoying rhythm and possibly find out why, but for sure make them stop right now. In the booth sits a little boy about 8 years old, and he is looking down at the table while continuing his kicking tune, apparently not noticing me. His hair on the left side is missing in spots compared to the right side, and his small hands are scarred and wrinkled. I slide into the seat opposite him in the booth and calmly say, "Hey pal, what is going on that you need to keep kicking the booth over there?" Without speaking, he stops kicking and lifts his head slowly while struggling to smile because his face is half burnt. This is a sickening sight to see since part of it is covered with what looks to be fur actually melted and at parts still smoldering. He lifts his right hand, which has a straw in it, to his lips on the side that is not deformed by the burning fur, and draws in a deep breath while his left molted hand, resting on the table, forms a middle finger in a gesture of flipping me off. He quickly blows through the straw with a wet whoosh sound. Silly me, I was expecting a nasty, squishy spitball to splat on my face, but I should have known by the looks of this kid's condition nothing is going to be normal. A fast-moving blaze hot ball comes out of the business end of the straw and lands on my cheek, and along with the pain, I see a flame from the projectile out of the corner of my left eye. The sick aroma of skin burning fills the air, and I urgently reach up to stop the burning and pain, but the flame erupts and all I can see is my forehead, hair, and hand go up in flames instantly. As I thresh in my seat to put the painful blaze out, I see the kid smiling his crooked fur smile and realize he is getting ready to fire another fireball at me. And yes, another fire rocket smacks me in the face, and I realize he is not going to let up for a while. Kids are not usually on my work order, but maybe Teddy Bear Face McSpitball should know who he's getting in the car with. I know you've been probably asking yourself what is going on and why is this person having this happen to them, which is a good question, and I will explain the best I can. There is truly a naughty and nice list. The guy in red from up north, he has access but uses it differently. And I get the naughty of the naughtiest. Those are the individuals I visit and make their life an excruciating hell. The individuals involved in my work often have others that are affected, and by that, I mean injured or maimed and eventually die a horrible death because of their unfortunate proximity to my targets. It's not right or fair, but I don't waste time on those things because I have a job to do, even if, and I said earlier, I do not intentionally involve others, but they interfere and or happen to be along for the ride with the target, then that could be an unfortunate experience for them. In theory, it's not my fault if you choose to be around or associate with terrible people who deserve the worst this world can do to them, but since I am the vessel that carries out the punishment, I'm looked at as the bad guy in the end. And as a bad guy, my so-called contract, which I signed and initialed, explains that those impacted by the work done to my target will have the ability to visit me as their last act on Earth before they go on to another life, and there are no rules or parameters as to what they can do to me. And a nice little subcategory to that rule is that I will feel and experience all levels of pain, anguish, and whatever they want to bestow upon me until the point that it kills me. But then I will be revived as to be able to experience this again and again and again throughout my sleeping hours. I hope you understand by now that these individuals are getting their revenge on me in my nightmares, and it happens all night, every night, and that is the price I have to pay for being the devil.
Deadhead by Lawrence Trokey. Jimmy had had enough of the fucking closet. He barricaded himself in there when things at work went to shit. Now 3 days had passed since he scrambled from his car into the office to escape being torn apart by the zombies that seemed to be running rampant everywhere. There were rumors and reports all over, with none of them able to explain a goddamn thing about what was going on. Jimmy had heard reports on the news about a new disease in China, or maybe South America, but was really too busy to pay attention. Besides, the news was usually a bunch of hype anyway, just a brief collection of useless information bookended between commercials for dick pills and cars. But then he began hearing reports about people getting sick in the U.S., so he got online to see what the hell was going on. Some reports on social media said the people who got sick were made insane by a virus or an infection, causing them to be vicious, attacking people like wild animals. The images were fucking disgusting. Jimmy couldn't stomach to look at too many of the reports. Other posts were more outrageous. They reported the sick weren't sick at all, but were actually reanimated dead bodies with no consciousness and a taste for human flesh. Seriously? Jimmy figured this was just a sign of people panicking over their loved ones getting struck down by the disease and then going ape shit crazy. He decided to give up his research when he encountered the most outlandish theory yet. A few so-called scientists suggested aliens from another world had found a way to possess human beings and then use these human drones as part of their plan to attack our world. Give me a fucking break, Jimmy remembered thinking at the time. The internet is so full of shit anyway, so he didn't give much credibility to any of it. He just went on with his life until he tried to go into work 3 days ago and almost became human sushi for a couple of those jacked up fuckers. Now he was stuck in this janitor closet until the extras from Night of the Living Dead were taken care of. Who would be doing the taking care of part? He wasn't exactly sure. Probably the army or the cops. He didn't care. All he knew was that he was hungry, sore from sleeping on the floor, and just in a shitty mood in general. He stood up determined to do something. Exactly what that was, he had no clue, but standing was a good start, he thought. He leaned close to the door to see if he could hear anything from the other side. There was a hell of a commotion out there a day ago. Jimmy heard things getting knocked over, glass breaking, bodies flopping around. It sounded like some sort of epileptic orgy for a while, and then silence. He hadn't heard anything since, and he didn't hear anything now. That had to be a good sign, right? He reached over to the shelf where he stored the collection of supplies he grabbed in the mad dash to the closet. Fortunately, those ugly fucks chasing him weren't very fast or smart. Things like doorknobs slowed them down, so he had a minute once he got inside the office to look through a couple of desks for something, anything he could use. A candy bar, a flashlight, a bottle of water, a flathead screwdriver. He crammed these things into his pockets as he searched. He also found an unexpected treasure. A pair of panties in the desk of the office receptionist. Melissa was her name, and she was a sight to see, Jimmy mused. Why she had a pair of skivvies tucked behind the number 10 envelopes was a mystery to him, but it did inspire a couple of fantasies about her while he hid in the closet. He tried for months to take Melissa out, but she was resistant to his advances. Not a quitter, he told himself it was only a matter of time. His irresistible charm would eventually win out. Next thing you know, they'd be mattress dancing. So far, though, the plan hadn't come to fruition. Now with everything going apeshit, he was sure that ship had sailed. Nevertheless, even if those sweet cheeks were filling those magical underpants now, it wouldn't fix his present problem. He needed to get home. There he'd be safe. He was sure of it. He could relax and watch the apocalypse unfold in HD from the comfort of his couch, his trusty shotgun across his lap for good measure. Let the soldiers and CNN do all the hard work. He was done. He decided to look outside, hoping to leave this little slice of heaven behind. He pushed the metal supply shelf barricading the closet door aside so it would open. The metal legs of the shelf screeched across the floor, making Jimmy wince. He paused for a moment to see if it alerted anyone or anything to his presence. Nothing appeared to register the noise, so he continued. With the door cracked open, Jimmy peered into the office. The power quit a day ago, not long after the commotion outside. The emergency lights were also dead, so the only light was from the windows on the far outside wall. It was near dusk outside, which cast an eerie glow on the furniture and fixtures. Just as he was ready to push the shelf out of the way completely, something slammed hard against the door, knocking Jimmy on his ass. "Shit!" he screamed as a head jammed itself into the opening. It became wedged in the tight space, stuck between the door and the jamb. Jimmy saw the mouth in the dim light snapping wildly at him. Spittle and blood sprayed him as he pushed away from the monstrous face. His hand rubbed against the handle of the screwdriver, which was on the floor now. His fingers wrapped around it, and he raised it slowly over his head, ready to deliver a vicious blow to the gruesome attacker. Mustering his courage, he brought the weapon down hard on the creature's head. Whether it was sweat or the fluid spraying him from the ghoul's mouth, Jimmy's grip failed, and the screwdriver slipped loose from his hand. He only managed to gouge the flesh of its forehead. No real damage. Jimmy dove to the far corner of the closet, knocking over brooms and mops in his wake. The angry face glared at him from the doorway and continued unscathed in its attempt to push into the closet. Now what? Jimmy thought as his heart slammed against his chest. Then another thought occurred to him, and not a moment too soon. The shelf was starting to give way under the constant barrage of dead weight pounding against the door. Jimmy stood quickly and grabbed one of the mops he tripped over. He checked the mop head to see if he could detach it, and found he could. He managed to do this just as the shelf was giving way. Jimmy raised the headless mop handle and thrust it with all he had at the figure pushing toward him. The metal tip of the handle somehow jammed into the creature's mouth and, to Jimmy's surprise and disgust, punched through the skull of the monster. Jimmy let out a scream that would have given an 8-year-old girl a run for her money. He released the broom handle and it fell backward with the body of his attacker into the dark office interior. Jimmy listened intently from the closet for what seemed like an hour. Then he got to his feet and took his first tentative steps out of the closet. He briefly glanced at the fallen figure with the broom handle protruding from its mouth, but the gruesome sight of his handiwork made him avert his eyes. Unfucking real. He wasn't sure what awaited him beyond the safety of the closet, but he was willing to risk it if it meant he could get back home, crawl into his favorite bottle of booze, and wait for the nightmare he was in to end. He reached downstairs without incident and passed quickly through the lobby, which looked like it had been the scene of a riot. Deciding not to investigate, he went out into the parking lot and paused to scan the area for trouble. Things were quiet. He jogged to his car and opened the driver's side door when a low rumbling sound made him look up. At that moment, he saw what could only be described as a floating city pushing through the evening clouds and filling the sky. From its belly, beams of light were reaching down to the ground, and in those beams, humanoid forms were descending. They floated slowly downward in a constant stream towards the earth. A gathering of them were forming in the distance and began marching in formation his way. His only response was to turn to the building and run like hell for the closet, cursing all the way.
Hello, this is Derek Leftridge. Also, we have Lawrence Trokey. We are the creators of the Shade Chronicles. We are new to podcasting, but not new to one another, and we've been friends for over 42 years and have been telling stories to one another during that time. For example...
Now for our story. As in our last story, Lawrence Trokey and Derek Leftridge saved the day again. Now our story starts off in a bar.
As you can tell, that was from one of the early stories that Derek and I put together. For some reason I got top billing on that one. But we don't want to spend too much time dwelling on the past. Turn it back over to you, Derek.
So, Lawrence, I have a question for you, and, well, I guess it's more of a comment. Deadhead was a very interesting story, and I really liked how you combined the zombies and the aliens. In my mind, it started out like horror and then turned into sci-fi. Can you kind of give a little bit of insight on that one?
Yeah, so Deadhead originally started as an entry for a story writing contest. There's a podcast, I think it might still be going on now, called The Walking Dead Podcast.
Okay.
A couple of guys from Canada that were doing a podcast commentary on all the episodes of The Walking Dead. And at the time, this is probably going back to 2009, 2010, somewhere in there, I had been watching the show like many people were at the time. And, I kind of got into it. And I wasn't, big into horror or zombies or anything like that. What I was really excited or into was the survival part of the show. How
that was addicting.
Yeah, how do you figure out how to survive when the world ends?
Mm-hmm. Right.
And I was just really fascinated with it. I wasn't into the comic book of The Walking Dead or anything like that by that time. So all I had was a TV show to kind of figure out what this thing was about.
Mm-hmm.
Well, then I was so interested that I started listening to a podcast about it where they would talk about each episode and kind of deconstruct it. And eventually they decided to run a contest for a short story contest. And so I wrote a short story about a thing that would happen in the universe of The Walking Dead.
Right.
Where this guy gets stuck in a closet and he's, trying to figure out how he's going to get out and survive. And then the other thing about it is when, I write a lot and have written a lot in the past. And when I read fiction, I find certain authors that I really enjoy because of their voice. And one of those was Elmore Leonard.
Mm-hmm.
Crime novelist of some repute. And so his voice, just the tone of the way he wrote things and how he would say things and, whether he's in a character's voice or in the narrator voice was really something that did it for me. I mean, I was just, thoroughly entertained by the way he did it. And I was trying to do that in writing this story about this guy. I tried to capture his persona or his attitude about life. He's kind of a dick. He's kind of an asshole.
Yeah.
And, just the way he talks about other people in the story, that kind of thing. And I thought that was a good place to start and, kind of play with that a little bit because it was kind of funny. I could make it, kind of tongue-in-cheek.
Yeah, I did get the humor in that. I did find it very interesting putting him in that setting. The setting was great.
Thank you. So anyway, I submitted this story. I had to make it 1,500 words, I believe, was with the criteria. And, to my astonishment, I won the contest. Now, it wasn't like I got $1 million or anything. I got some signed comic book pages of somebody who wrote a fan comic book about Daryl Dixon or something like that from the story. And, the acknowledgement or recognition that I won the contest. But, for me, it was like, holy crap, I won this thing and somebody actually liked what I wrote. So then, I started looking for other opportunities shortly thereafter to submit stories. And there was a science fiction writing story contest that was coming up in a few months after this. And I adapted the Deadhead story from a completely, Walking Dead zombie kind of thing.
Oh yeah, the great object of recycling.
Exactly. Why work harder when you can work smarter, right?
Yep.
So I tweaked the ending to make it more sci-fi, and that's what we see on the podcast. Is the starts off with a zombie story and ends up kind of sci-fi.
Yeah, that was very good. I liked it.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it.
Appreciate it.
So, switching gears a little bit from what I wrote, you wrote His Nightmares, and when I first read it and first listened to it, I was really impressed with the uniqueness of the idea. And, sure, you have the big reveal at the end of who we're actually talking about and what's going on, in this whole time is what he's experiencing. But what was your inspiration for that? Where did that come from?
I think my thing is I like things that have kind of a twist on the end. I don't try to stick with that all the time because that can get old. And you can also see those things coming if you do it too much. So, but I wanted to kind of get the idea of, I guess first at the beginning of this, I had a short story book I was putting together, and this was going to be filtered into it in 3 parts, and it was going to be a story that I thought would catch attention, pull people through, so you'd have that part, the first part of it, then you would have a short story, then you have the second part of it, and it would continue and kind of pull you through the book to kind of keep you interested. So that's what my main reasoning for it was there. So it was very few words compared to what it is now, and so I had to adapt it and make it longer. And I wanted to add more things to it because I think it was a very good way for me to be able to give more description of things and kind of put people into situations. And like yourself, I entered it into a contest. I, unlike you, did not win, but I did make it longer and made it more words to where it would be more of a complete story. And then when we decided that we were going to do this podcast, I was like, I think I'm going to bring that one out because I think it's interesting. I just like the idea, basically, to answer your question, of having a take on the devil's perspective because that he's a bad dude, and he's got to have an asshole of a life, so he's got to be getting punished somehow, and he needs to be punished. So I thought it'd be interesting to have his take on how that is, and then maybe get very, very graphic and very detailed on the different things he goes through.
Right. So let me ask you about, so you got 3 different characters that torture the devil.
Correct.
During this story. You got the woman at the beginning. What's kind of the idea going on there?
She's coming. Well, they're all coming back to get their revenge, and basically, I think my mindset is that they were in proximity of other people that the devil was quote unquote punishing. I don't know, maybe a few of them actually were punished because they were the ones that did something. I didn't really get into that in my head, but she was going to be somebody that he caused to have, I think it was like lacerations and things like that, or get beat up or just be tortured. So she came back and tortured him. And I'll go on with the other ones. The motorcycle person was just because he's part of a motorcycle gang in my mind, and he's just a bad person overall. So he was punished, and I thought it'd be a pretty cool way of kind of explaining how they got together, how he came up on him, and things like that. So it was just kind of what is a quintessential in a lot of movies bad guy was punished, and he was coming back, and then the kid,
which I gotta say was twisted.
Yeah, that was one that was my favorite. Got to the end of it, and I'm like, I gotta really ramp this up for myself even. So the kid was, I think, more or less in proximity of somebody that was a bad person, and the kid got hurt because of it, and it was involving a fire. And what I like about that part and saying that is that the kid was not the person that was supposed to get hurt. He got hurt because of someone else, but he doesn't care. He's going to get back at the devil.
Gotcha.
Yeah, right.
Makes all kinds of sense.
Oh yeah.
Well, guys, that's it for this episode. We just wanted to have a little commentary there at the end about the stories that were featured on the podcast. We hope you enjoyed it. We hope you tune in to the next episode of the Shade Chronicles coming up soon. And here's a trailer for it now. Next time on the Shade Chronicles. He was cut off by an alarm that sounded through the ship. Simultaneously, the emergency broadcast system appeared on the television in the background of Nick's home. Megan turned to face the screen, realized what it meant, and fear shot across her face. "You've got to go. Get to your dad's now. I love you," Nick shouted at the screen. Megan couldn't speak for a second because emotions choked her voice. But as she tried to respond in kind to Nick's statement, the connection was lost. He sat there for a few moments, realizing his whole world had just blinked out of existence. Without warning, Nick started to feel weird. His vision blurred, and his head felt light. He tried to shake off the feeling and focus on flying the jet. The feeling became more intense, and then a voice in his head said, familiar. He didn't know why he heard this in his head or what it meant. Before he could do anything else, Nick blacked out.
Growing up at my grandparents' home, the scariest place on earth was their basement. Even when I began to live in the basement, it still would creep me out, and to this day, the strange things that happen are very unnerving at this time. My memory is always fuzzy at this part, but if I can concentrate and think, with this cold fear building, there should be one last landing in the final flight of steps up ahead. As I continue to stagger down the second flight, I can sense there is no wall or barrier on my left side. It is all open space. I can feel an empty breeze on my face. At step 20 or 21, I am getting dizzy. I finally get to the third landing, and the light from the second landing is mostly non-existent. I stumble on the first step, and I land hard. I feel something graze my legs. When I look up the stairs to the top in my escape, I see the ones that will help me with their bright white robes, smiling and reaching for me.
Thanks again for listening to the Shade Chronicles. For comments or inquiries, you can contact us at shadechron@gmail.com. That's SHADECHRON@gmail.com. Visit us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. You can also get more information at theshadechronicles.com. The Shade Chronicles Podcast is the creative property of Derek Leftridge and Lawrence Trokey. Stories in this podcast were the sole creation of Derek Leftridge and Lawrence Trokey, respectively. Any attempt to replay for broadcast or distribution portions of any episode of the Shade Chronicles without the prior written consent from the creators and or significant compensation is strictly prohibited. Shame on you for even thinking about it in the first place. Thanks again for listening. Tune in next time for another episode of the Shade Chronicles.